Hey guys, it's been a little while since I've posted. I've been playing quite a bit of in-person Yu-Gi-Oh, so I haven't really had a whole lot of time, but thought I would do an updated deck profile for my Reasoning Gate deck since a few people have been asking for that. So I'll do the profile and then I will do some test hands as well since people seemed to like that the last time. Before I jump in, if you haven't watched my other videos or are unfamiliar with my take on this deck, the build is a little bit different than your standard Reasoning Gate deck. It is slightly a little bit more on the grindier control side. Definitely can still OTK. I definitely would not call it a control deck by any means. It's just slightly more control than the standard Glass Cannon build that is focusing on, OTKing every time. Maybe the ones where you're running Toon Cannon Soldier and whatnot. So with that, I'll just jump right in and I'll explain as I go. So starting us off, we have the boys, the Chaos Monsters, one BLS Triple Sork. I still really like Triple Sork because you actually want to mill them so that you get Darks in your grave and you can get them back with Monster Reincarnation, and you're going to be milling them. So I find that when I cut this down to 3, I don't see the Chaos Monster enough because I've milled them all. So I really like the Triple Chaos Sork. 3 can be a little bit cloggy sometimes, but I would rather clog sometimes than not see that card enough. Now for the normal summonable dark targets, so the targets for Reasoning and Monster Gate, you have Demok the Boy, Jinzo, and Fusilier. Fusilier, maybe you can cut this. I still really like it. It's normal summonable, it's a level 7, so you can do cheeky things with like King Dragoon and Last Warrior. And it's just a 2800 body. That's pretty big. It's not super exciting to hit this off of Reasoning or Monster Gate, but your opponent still needs to out it in one way or another. Next up, we have the light targets. One Zaborg, Double Crane. This is the new addition to the deck. I know it looks really strange in this deck, but it's really good. And if you haven't tried it, I would at least try it before you knock it. So I'm playing this over the Air Knight, and I just really like this because Air Knight just feels so bad when you summon it into your opponent's spy. It's also really bad against warriors because they have battle traps and Blade Knight just runs right over it. Air Knight's really only against decks that are running Scapegoat, which are kind of less popular than like Chaos Turbo decks, which are running Spy. Zaborg is really nice because it facilitates your pushes for game because you can summon it and pop your opponent's card. It's also really nice when you made a Thousand Eyes and take your opponent's face down and your Thousand Eyes has 0 attack, and then your opponent keeps setting more face downs. You can summon tribute the Thousand Eyes, pop your opponent's face down, attack over the other face down potentially, and even if they're spies, it doesn't even matter. And it's also good, this deck kind of struggles when your opponent starts maybe looping Magician of Faith and face downs and whatnot, so it helps you deal with that. Obviously, if you hit this off of Monster Gate Reasoning, it's just a 2400 vanilla at that point, but 24 is a pretty good stat line. Still attacks over Chaos Sorcerer, still attacks over, like I said, Spy. And I just really like this in the deck. It comes up quite a bit that you have this in your hand, and you just pop your opponent's monster, get a free 2400 damage in the face. And then to round out the monster lineup, you have one Sinister Serpent. I know this is weird, but if you guys follow my lists and my other videos, I love this card. I know that adding this card to the deck automatically changes the playstyle of the deck a little bit. It makes the deck a little bit slower because you're adding an additional monster, so you're going to be milling less in between the monsters. It's also not a light or dark, so it's not helping you progress for your chaos plays. But I really like Serpent because hitting this early on in the game just makes it so that you always have a resource that you can use for your monster gates, your metas, Lightning Vortex, Monster Reincarnation. In addition, it's also just really nice to have a monster that you can keep normal setting each turn. For example, in a tournament this past weekend, my opponent made, they stole my Fusilier and made Last Warrior against me, which, in normal situations, when your opponent makes Last Warrior and you have no monsters, that's like a 3 or 4 turn clock right off the bat. And if you can't, out it in 3 or 4 turns with like literally Brain Control or Snatch Steal, then you're just gonna lose the game. But I had a Sinister Serpent in play and basically just kept setting it and blocked literally like 4 attacks with it until I finally drew a Snatch Steal and was able to out the Last Warrior and go for game. And then also a little bit of theory behind this card. Yes, literally you're running a higher monster count, so you're milling less in between monsters. But this is really only negatively game breaking when it is the one monster that's in the deck right before DMOC, specifically when you're trying to monster gate. Because in that situation, if you weren't running this, you would have hit the DMOC. So only in that situation, and it needs to be, you know, a point in the game where that's really crucial to hit the DMOC. If it's anywhere in the deck deeper than the DMOC, it literally just doesn't even make a difference. So this makes your monster gates worse, but it makes your reasonings better. I normally wouldn't reasoning first turn if I wasn't playing this, but since I am playing this, I reasoning first turn all the time, and I often hit this card, and it just feels really good having this in play very early in the game. Also, I mean, this weekend it also, my opponent discarded off a Delinquent Duo. So yeah, I just really like Sinister Serpent, and I would also really just try it out before you knocked it. All right, moving on to the spells, we have the power one-ofs. Pot of Greed, Graceful Heavy Storm. No need for Duo in this deck because, you know, Duo doesn't really progress your strategy. I'm also running one Giant Trunade. I've cut this down from previous builds just to one because, as we just saw, my build is a little bit slower than, you know, the super OTK builds, and I was finding that the games I lost, I was clogging on Trunade too often. So cut this down to one. If you're running a more Glass Cannon build, I could see you bumping it up to two, maybe even three if you're a freak. Moving on, we have Snatch, Steal, Brain Control. I like the one main deck Brain Control. I have thought about bumping up to two, but I think one works pretty well. Premature, Monster Reincarnation, Lightning Vortex. These are the other one-ofs to round it off. Sorry, not round it off, we still have more spells. But these are the other, actually rounding off the one-ofs anyway. Of these three, my favorite is definitely Premature because it's just too broken. You can do the combo with Trunade where you bounce it back to your hand and get to use it again. Also, just summoning Crane, drawing one, having a monster on board and the draw one is just really good. And then Premature is also really good because it makes it so that you don't really care if your opponent guesses correctly off of reasoning. Like if they get 8 correctly and put 8 in the grave, you can just pre-met back your DMAC. And that just feels so good. All right, rest of the spells. We got triple reasoning, triple monster gate. I mean, this is literally the name of the deck, right? Probably no need to explain this here. We got triple scapegoat, triple metamorphosis. Scapegoat at 3 I think is necessary no matter what. Metamorphosis, if I wasn't running the Serpent, I would think about maybe cutting one because this can be a little bit cloggy if you're not running the Serpent. But otherwise, I usually don't find times where this is dead. And a lot of times I like drawing multiple because if your opponent has an answer to the first Thousand Eyes that you make with like Book of Moon and Ring, you could just make a second one, which feels really good. And the Metamorphosis is also important because it can get lights and darks in your grave. You can meta your Zaborg or your Jinzo to get light and dark grave. And then also you can do the soft loop combo with DMOC where you Metamorphosis the DMOC, make a Gatling Dragon, Dimension Fusion back the DMOC, and maybe grab back Metamorphosis or Dimension Fusion again. And if you have multiple, you can just like do that loop over and over again. So I really like Metamorphosis. It's also just super versatile. You can even like Brain Control or Snatch your opponent's Thousand Eyes and make your own Thousand Eyes. Now we have triple Dimension Fusion. I like 3 in this deck. My deck's a little bit more grindy. I'm milling, you know, quite a bit. I like having the third one in the deck. I think if you're playing a build with a lower monster count where you have higher chances of getting DMOC off of Monster Gate, I can see you cutting this maybe down to 2 just so you don't break as often, and then in those builds, you're milling more and you're hitting DMOC more, so you can add this back in that way. But in this build, I really like 3, and I often find myself in this build making multiple pushes, either using, you know, anywhere from 1 to 3 Dimension Fusions a game. So, and then the last 2 spells, Upstart. I really like Upstart. I used to not like it, but I will never play this deck without Upstart. There's just too many games where Upstart draws me into Pot of Greed and Graceful. And then finally, for the last 3 cards, we have 3 traps. We have Call the Haunted, busted in this deck. You can bring back Jinzo. You can, like, if Jinzo's in your grave, you can Trunade or Heavy Storm, chain this, bring back the Jinzo, which feels really good. Obviously brings back DMOC. Keep in mind that if you bring back DMOC, DMOC can miss timing, so it needs to be the last thing to happen. So for example, if your opponent Heavy Storms or MSTs this, you can't chain this, bring back DMOC, add a spell, because DMOC will miss the timing. However, Crane will not miss the timing because Crane is mandatory. DMOC is optional. And then 2 Jar of Greeds. This might look weird in this build, especially because I've been saying that the build is not super turbo build, but I like the Jar of Greeds because you can draw them early on with Scapegoat and then potentially bluff out your opponent's Heavy Storm. Also just makes you look like you have more defense than you actually do. And I don't like running 3 Jar of Greeds because when you run 3, then you just start drawing Jar of Greed off of Jar of Greed way too often. And when you do that, you're setting yourself a turn behind. It's almost like you're just time stealing yourself. So when I draw 3, I start to top deck it and draw into it a little bit more than I'm comfortable with. But with 2, it's like if you open it, it's pretty good. And if you don't open it, you're probably gonna mill it, mill it. So I think 2 works out, pretty well for me. And then usually you end up sending out the Jar of Greeds, especially when you're going second. Okay, let me show the side deck. I don't really like to show side decks with deck profiles because 1, they're always changing based on the meta and whatnot. And then 2, your side deck should really be tailored for your local metagame, or if you're playing online, the online metagame. But I will show my side deck because I have a pretty interesting side strat against warriors that I'll just, give you guys some food for thought about. So double Vampire Lord, this looks weird, I know, but this is part of my side strat. I'll explain it in a bit. Let me just go through the list. Brain Control, Delinquent Duo, Nobleman, Giant Trunade, Mystic Walk. Brain Control comes in against aggro, also really good for getting rid of King Tiger Wangus or Kaikus. Delinquent Duo, good against combo decks, good against the mirror, good against burn, potentially against warriors if you're going first. Nobleman, this could be mind control if you want to, but it's obviously against like Chaos Turbo, other flip decks. I like Nobleman because if it's near graveyard, you can add it back with DMOC and just clear their monster. Whereas mind control, you need to have space on your board, so that's kind of annoying. Giant Trunade, the second one here, really good against burn, especially if they're activating their level M ARBs or gravity binds or what's that one called? Chain Energy. And then Mystic Walk for burn. Honestly, this card is so good in time, especially sudden death, so you could bump that up to 2. I think that'd be pretty good. Traps, the staples, Ring of Destruction, Torrential Mirror Force. These come in quite a bit, especially because post side your opponent's gonna be putting in Wangus, so you have to have outs to deal with that. Torrential and Ring, really good against these usually come in against Chaos Turbo, and these are also pretty good against Go Control, clear the tokens, clear the Thousand Eyes. Mirror Force, good against aggro decks. And then we have some weird traps here. Sakuretsu, Compulse, Threatening, good against the Mirror Match or other OTK decks, maybe some rogue decks. Compulse, I just really like this as an easy out to Thousand Eyes, as an easy out to Spell Canceller, Last Warrior. It's also just very versatile, and being chainable is always really good. And then finally Sakuretsu, this is maybe a little bit weird in here, but it's for aggro decks, and it's also part of the side strat, which I've been talking about. And then finally the last 2 traps are 2 Royal Decrees. Pretty good against Chaos Turbo if they're running Jar of Greeds and Judgments, especially if you're going first. Otherwise, if you're going second, it's kind of a little bit slower, and they can regularly break this when you activate it. So less good going second, but if you're going first, you can consider putting that in. Okay, let me talk about the side strat against warriors real quick. So the problem with warriors is that it's really hard to pull off your regular combo, and I basically do a little smoke screen action against warriors because, first of all, they're putting in Wangus, so you're not going to have scapegoats to protect yourself a lot of time or access to Thousand Eyes. And warriors can easily put like 6,000 damage on board in the first like 2 to 3 turns, which will make your Dimension Fusion dead. On top of that, they're running Judgments and they're running Kaikus. So pulling off this combo is really hard. You basically have to get a light and dark setup within the first like 2 turns. You have to be able to summon this card, which you can't do if they have Kaiku, and you have to have this card in your hand and have enough life points to activate it and hope that your opponent doesn't have a Judgment. So it's just really hard to play your normal strategy against warriors. So I basically side out all the the chaos orcs and the dimension fusions. And what I do is I put in these cards, potentially this, maybe not though, something like that. And I basically just turn it into a more simple game state where I'm just summoning bigger monsters than they are, and they have to be able to out my monsters. And Vampire Lord, you're gonna get this a lot because you're not gonna guess 5. And then Vampire Lord doesn't give a fuck about Ring of Destruction, Mirror Force, Torrential, Sakuretsu. It also doesn't care about Solemn because it'll come back if your opponent Solemns this, if you normal summon this. And your opponent can't even Solemn it if you get this off of Monster Gate and Reasoning, because they would have to Solemn the Monster Gate or Reasoning. So you just get this on board and you start beating them down. And your opponent's really only outs to this are Blade Knight and DU Warrior Lady, so they have like 4 outs to it. But that's why you're playing things like Ring of Destruction, Mirror Force, Sakuretsu, potentially even Compulse if you want this. But Blade Knight, they have to crash into it, which is like meh. DU Warrior Lady is really the only big threat there, and hopefully you can out that with those or bait out the DU Warrior Lady early. And then Brain Control, like I already said, get rid of their King Tiger Wangu, get rid of their Kaiku, and then you can attack with their monster. If they Sakuretsu it, then they go neg, or you could just tribute their monster for Vampire Lord, attack them 2000 direct. If they Solemn the Vampire Lord, then I mean they're gonna pay 4,000 for that, and your Vampire Lord is coming back next turn, so it doesn't really hurt you too much. But that is the side strat against warriors. I find myself struggling really quite a bit against warriors, especially because they're on the triple Solemn bullshit. But yeah, let's move on to the extra deck. I'll go over it really fast. It's super standard. I'm maybe just missing one card. Triple Thousand Eyes, Dragoness, Darkfire. I'm missing the Flame Ghost, but that hardly ever comes up unless you like Snatch Steel Sangan. Dark Bolter, Fiend Skull Dragon, Reaper, Ryu Senshi, Dark Blade, Ojama, King Dragoon, Last Warrior, Twin-Headed, Double Gatling Dragon. This is, aside from Thousand Eyes, this is like the only card you really need multiples of, maybe Bolter. And then Master Vaz, which you're basically never gonna get to make unless you Snatch Steal a Cyberstein. Okay, that was the deck profile. Now we're gonna move into some test hands. Okay, so the way I like to do test hands is I'll do one hand where I'm assuming I'm going first, like game 1 of a match, and then I'll do another hand where I am assuming I'm going second. So I'll just do that a few times and flip back and forth and explain my thought process. Okay, so going first. Okay, that's already looking pretty sweet. Okay, we're gonna upstart for 1, and we're gonna Pot of Greed for 2. And this is just like a godly first turn hand. You can set the Jar of Greed as well as the Scapegoat, and this is like a sick looking hand. Okay, if your opponent heavies, they're screwed here. Otherwise, if they attack, you can block with Scapegoat. If they T-set, you're probably gonna Scapegoat in the end phase because you have Monster Gate. So let's just assume that they T-set, you activate Scapegoat in the end phase, draw 1. Whoa, okay. It looks like I stacked this deck low-key. Okay, that's kind of crazy. I'm going to Jar of Greed first in case I hit Jinzo. And now we can hold the Graceful, I think, and just start monster gating because we have Serpent in the deck. We might hit that. We'd want to get that out of the deck. Okay, so we hit the Crane, get to draw 1, get heavy. That's pretty good. We can just go ham and monster gate again. You can also heavy if you're scared of your opponent's back row, but let's just do this. Okay, so we have the Serpent. Not great, not the worst. At this point, I think we're going to want to hold the Graceful until we can get some value off of the Serpent. But you could do something like if you think your opponent has a Spy, maybe you could tribute these for this, attack into that Spy, maybe get another one, maybe it's 2 set 1. And then next turn, okay, they have to out this. If they don't, that's fine, but let's just say they out it. And then you can draw 1, add back the Serpent. Maybe we can, this is interesting. I think we can Graceful right now. 1, 2, 3. And that's just absolutely broken because we can we can discard the Demok and the Serpent. Now at this point, I think we can go ahead and If your opponent has back row, you're going to want Giant Trunade just to clear the stuff. Otherwise, you can maybe get cheeky and do the Trunade pre-mat combo. But let's just Giant Trunade to clear the back row. Activate Call to bring back Sacred Crane to draw 1. This gets put, ooh, there's the Borg. And I have not normal summoned this turn. Add back the Call. This goes to grave, this goes to grave. At this point, your opponent has clear back row, so you can activate pre-mat to get back D-Mock. And hopefully there's a Dimension Fusion in the grave, which there is. There is indeed Dimension Fusion in the grave. You can, we haven't upstarted yet, so let's upstart here. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and tribute this for Zaborg, pop their face down. D-Mock gets banished, but then we can Dimension Fusion D-Mock back. We use Dimension Fusion to add, D-Mock to add Dimension Fusion back. We can Metamorphosis the D-Mock, Dimension Fusion again to bring it back. So now we have a Gatling on the field like that. And they should have a clear field since you pop with that. And if they don't, you can Gatling to pop even more. D-Mock, you can add back, let's say, I don't know, maybe pre-mat. Unless there's a monster reincarnation in here, I guess. No monster reincarnation. So you can pre-mat to get back Crane, draw another one. Oh, look at that. This Chaos Sorcerer is live, I believe. No, it's not live. Never mind. Psych. But it will be next turn. But this should be enough for game. That's already 26, 5,078 plus 16 is what, 94. Even though you activated 2 upstarts, that's still over 9,000 damage right there. All right, so that was going first. I'll do going second next. I guess we'll do, let's say, 4 test hands total. Okay, let me shuffle in here so you guys know that I'm not stacking the deck. But that was a pretty busted hand. All right, maybe this one will be a little bit more fair. All right, going second. Okay, any hand with Graceful in it is really good, so that's already pretty sick. Generally, I don't like to rip this Graceful. I really like to wait until I have a monster that I can pitch off this Graceful, like a Crane or a D-Mock or something like that, or a Jinzo. And there's no reason to really use it right off the bat, so I'd probably just set the Scapegoat. If they have a lot of back row, I kind of like to set like another one as a bluff in case they have an MST or Dust Tornado, because if they end phase me and hit the Scapegoat, I'm pretty much just screwed. So in that situation, I kind of like to just set another bluff. So I'd probably just set a Dimension Fusion as a bluff to give me a 50-50 right here. But you know, assuming, you know, maybe they summon a monster and now they summon a second monster, they have 2, they attack, maybe I could just activate Scapegoat to block some attacks. Now I draw, that's not very good. Let's Monster Gate to see what we get here. It'd be really nice to hit a Crane or a D-Mock, but we're gonna hit the Serpent Army. Okay, that's not bad. So we hit the Zaborg. At this point, I kind of still want to hold this Graceful a little bit longer, but we could just attack and see where that gets us. We still have 2 tokens probably to protect our life. So we attack, maybe they Sakuretsu or clear it. Now we can set another Scapegoat. Maybe they clear these tokens. You might want to activate the other Scapegoat. It really just depends what they have, but let's just say we activate the other one, and maybe we end up with 3 tokens on the board like that. All right, let's draw. Okay, still not looking great, but at this point, I think we can go ahead and Graceful, see what we get. Okay, so that's pretty good. Because we have the Call the Haunted for the D-Mock. Okay, so let's go ahead and pitch those. So I'm glad I waited for this Graceful. You see what I mean? And then we can upstart right here, draw 1. At this point, I think it's fine if we set this, because even if they Nobleman it, we can bring it back with Dimension Fusion, which we have 2 of. And let's just say at this point, they clear everything, and maybe best case scenario for them, they get to Nobleman this, which usually the second you set in this deck, if they have a Nobleman, they're going to use it right away, because that's the only time they're going to get to use it. So you can kind of bait them out like that and use it to your advantage. I'm sorry, I forgot to set this Call of Haunted as well. So we're going to draw 1. Okay, we finally drew the Serpent. So We can try to go for this play. Like, they might have a Judgment or they might have Dust Tornado, which is highly likely, but let's just pretend it goes through for the sake of this play. We can add back, oh, sorry, whoops. We add back the Graceful, draw 1, draw 2, draw 3. We can pitch the Serpent and maybe the Upstart question mark. We can Monster Gate this away to go for 1, 2, 4. Okay, get this dude out. At this point, we can try to activate this, get these two back. Maybe they have a Judgment there, but that's fine. If they have Judgment, you could slap down the Heavy Storm, activate your second Diffusion, and bring these back. But yeah, that was a going second hand. Let's do 2 more test hands, one going first, one going second. Oh, let me shuffle over here. Okay, so here's going first hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, I like to rip the Reasoning off the bat if I know there is a Serpent in the grave, and I think it's fine even if they hit a light or dark because I have the Chaos in my hand, so that'll help facilitate that. But I'll give them a handicap. Let's just say that if it's 4 or 8, they'll get it correct. That's usually how I like to test it. Okay, so 4 or 8, so they got it correct. There's 4 right there. This is going first, right? So I can set the Scapegoat and just pass, probably. You can block attack or activate this in the end phase. Well, if they don't attack, I probably won't activate this, actually, because I have no way to convert this. But I'd probably just eat 1 attack, probably. Draw 1. Okay, now I wish I activated it. Okay, so I'd probably pass again. And now if they attack, I can eat both attacks with that. Now I draw 1. At this point, it's tempting to Monster Gate. I think I'll just Monster Gate right here. See what we get. Okay, because Zaborg. At this point, I think I probably want to Graceful for 3. 1, 2, 3. That's interesting. You can pitch this and maybe either the Scapegoat or the Sork. I guess we could pick the Scapegoat. Then we could try to Reasoning. They have to call 8 at this point in the game. So yeah, they got 8 right. We could pre-map back the Demok. Hopefully that goes through. But this is looking pretty good at this point. If we had, actually we could Heavy. Yeah, we can grab, oh no, we need Diffusion, don't we? We have to grab back Diffusion, which is right there. And at this point, we could just attack with these, and once they clear these, we could do the combo. All right, last test hand, and we'll do going second. Right? Yeah, going second. Low-key losing track of how many testings I've done. All right, so we're going second. Not the best, not the worst. Probably just set the drawer and the Scapegoat and pass. If they attack, let's just say they attack and they kill. If they're lucky, they have 2 monsters on the board, so they attack and kill 2. Okay, draw. That's pretty good. If you want, you could Heavy Storm right here if they have back row. Chain this jar to draw 1. Not great. I always like to lead with a Monster Gate in case I hit the Serpent first. This way you can convert it after. Now here you can probably get a little greedy and Monster Gate again since you have another Scapegoat meta play right there. But hopefully we don't hit the Serpent. Okay, so we just hit this, and we also assumed that they had 2 monsters that they're attacking with, so we could just clear both monsters right there. And now we're in a pretty decent position. Maybe you don't want to set this until you have 4 slots on the field to activate it. But it would be pretty shitty if they snatch steal this and then crash into this, attack you with like Don's Luke or something. So maybe you would set it actually. They just pretend to clear these with they have a monster, and we can scapegoat 4 more tokens. Draw 1. Let's just reasoning to see what we get. They're probably gonna call 8 at this point. Kind of have to. Hopefully we hit a 4 or 1. Okay, we hit the 1. Great. And then we can meta, take your opponent's monster, and then just see where we go from here. Oh, we top decked a Greed next. Well, sorry, maybe that was nice. And then we top decked a Greed next turn, so we draw 2. And then this is a pretty decent spot because you can meta for another Thousand Eyes where you have the Serpent in your hand, and your Chaos Sorcerer should be live, right? You got Light and Dark and Grave, so that's pretty good. And you have Snatch Steal as well, so there you go. Those are the test hands. Luckily, I was able to show a couple hands where the Serpent did come up, and you can see that usually you always have a way to convert it. And you guys also saw a few examples of where the Sinister Serpent provides a lot of utility. All right, thanks for watching. See you guys.